بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be with you. We talked about the beginning of the creation, even before the creation and then the creation, and now we are reaching an essential point in history. It's the creation of Adam and Eve that we find in the Qur'an. And this creation, beyond all, the scientific discussions that we can have about what happened exactly, that's not the point. In the Qur'an, we have the story, as well as we have this story in other traditions. We find this in the Jewish tradition, in the Christian tradition. We have the same story, but in fact, the same story with different understandings. And we have to be very, very cautious not to compare in a very simplistic way, because the same stories are there, but not with the same meaning and not with the same features. And we have to be quite explicit and quite clear about the differences, because these differences will have a great impact on history and the way, for example, in the Christian tradition, the connection between Adam and Eve had with, for example, the conception of women in Christianity, and even the conception of knowledge. So what we find here, it's important, and we have just to try to get the essence of the story, the essence of the beginning of the creation. In the Quran, you have many verses talking about it in different places and different ways, but I will just rely on the verse in Surah 7, when it is said, وَيَا آدَمُ اسْكُنْ أَنْتَ وَزَوْجُكَ الْجَنَّةَ وَكُلَا مِنْ حَيْثُ شِئْتُمَا وَلَا تَقْرَبَا هَذِهِ الشَّجَرَةَ فَتَكُونَ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. What we find here is a verse when it is said, and you, Adam, inhabit the garden, you and your wife, and don't come close to this tree, you will be from the unjust. This verse, it's important here because, in fact, through it we have many teachings that we need to get and to understand. First, what we have here is Ya Adam, iskun anta wa zawjuka. You, Adam, inhabit the earth, you, the garden, you and your wife. And from the very beginning here, there is an understanding in the Islamic tradition that both are going to be involved in the decision. So we don't have a figure like Eve in the Christian tradition seducing or being seduced as a woman and influencing Adam to do the wrong thing. We don't have this in the Quran. In fact, from the very beginning, both are involved and they took the wrong decision. They did bad, both of them together. So they are responsible, both of them, for what happened. That's an important teaching here, because the figure of women being seductive or being seduced or being the channel of what is bad and the bad moral dimension is not Islamic at all. We don't have this as something which is part of our tradition. So from the very beginning, they were co-responsible of what happened from the very beginning as the first creatures on earth in the garden, before being on earth in the garden. So this is something which is also important in our understanding of the story. And now there is a second teaching here. And it's about the tree, because if you read the verse of the Quran, it's a tree, it's not an apple tree. By the way, in the Christian tradition, is not even an apple tree. This was decided afterward because of a drama representation that we use an apple. But in fact, it was qualified in the Christian tradition as the tree of knowledge, what is good and what is bad. in Islam, in the Quran, there is no qualification. It's a tree, and from what we understand, you can eat whatever you want. You are free to do whatever you want in the garden, except to come close to that tree. And this tree, which is not qualified, has another function. It's not about knowledge. It's not about what is the bad. It's just for you to acknowledge with your freedom. Remember what we said when we were talking about language. Within language, you have freedom and knowledge. So you are free and you can be knowledgeable, but you have to acknowledge that there are limits. And this is where you understand that there is here a relationship between you and God. God is giving you what is necessary for you to be dignified as a human being, but He is also giving you the way you should understand the dignified relationship you have with Him. So it's about knowledge, but it's about humility and acknowledgement that there are limits, because Allahu A'lam, God knows best. You can't go that way. So in fact, the tree, the function of the tree, it's not about knowledge. It's not about knowledge being bad and it's bad for you to know. No, it's bad for you to be arrogant, to think that you can go beyond the limits. So once again, we come to something which is essential here about limitation and acknowledgement of our own limitation. The tree has a function to send us back to this self-consciousness of the way we should know and the way we have to acknowledge our own limitation. And it's not, once again, what we got in the Christian tradition. And remember, Nietzsche was saying, in fact, science should be a woman, because out of the story that we have in Christianity, it's knowledge was bad and the woman was seducing and was the first to eat from that tree. So she is responsible, and there is a connection between women's knowledge and the bad. That's not what we find in the Quran, because both were responsible and the tree is not qualified. Now we have to add another teaching in this story when it comes to the tree and the knowledge. It's that, in fact, what happened is that they made the mistake. They didn't respect the limits. And in fact, both were involved, and they came back to God. And they came back to God, and there is nothing in the Islamic tradition which is connected to the original sin. We are not responsible for what Adam and Eve did, for the fact that they didn't respect. And it gives us from the very beginning a deep understanding of our behavior and the way we should be with God. You do things, you are responsible. So there is a sense of personal responsibility. Your sins are not going to be inherited by your children. And what you do as a child has no consequence of what your father is going to face before God, except if he or your mother didn't provide you with the right education. But this is another story. At the end of the day, there is a personal responsibility. There is nothing that we can do. So at the end of the day, it's important is that if your father is dignified and a believer, or your mother, it doesn't mean that you will get this out of your blood relationship. No. In fact, it's your personal commitment to what is good and your personal avoidance of what is bad, which makes you a human being with the right features. And this happened because, in fact, from the very beginning, yes, they had to pay for not having respected the limits. And from the garden, they went on earth. But God, أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. Both now and today for our own self, that they said from the very beginning, which is وَإِن لَمْ تَغْفِرْ لَنَا وَتَرْحَمْنَا, if you don't forgive us, if you don't show mercy, we are going to be among the losers. That's an important teaching also in the way from the very beginning human beings are connected to God, which once again has to do with three things that we need to get as a summary. First, you are created and you have the knowledge and you have the freedom, but you should know the limits. So intellectual capacity goes with intellectual humility. You should respect the limits. And if you transgress the limits, you should know that you are personally responsible. You cannot blame anyone else. You are responsible of your own behavior. And third, whatever you have done, you should also know that God is merciful and He will welcome you coming back to Him, because this is exactly what life is all about. Acknowledging His presence, knowing that we are responsible, and knowing at the same time that He is full of mercy and He is the forgiver. Don't forget to tell the people you love that you love them. Life is fragile.
Stay tuned to Islam 21C to catch the front row for the online masjid.